Okay, welcome to this episode of the Smart Leader Style podcast. I'm Jessica. I'm a sales coach and leadership expert, and I'm really excited about this week's episode because I'm sharing the down low of what happened with the podcast after last week. I know, it's a little bit early, but I have been correlating results along with Liz and Scott and everyone else who works on the team furiously like a little ninja so that we can share them with you and let you know exactly why we did the things that we did, what got the best results, what didn't pay off, so that you can obviously go ahead and you can implement that in your own visibility strategy, which might be useful this week. You might be focusing on visibility, and if you're not, then that's okay too, because come the end of the summer holidays, I'm sure that you'll be like, right, okay, traffic, what is going down? And do I want to start a podcast or not? You might do, you might not. If you do, then get in touch because I would love to hear podcast ideas. That is one of my favorite things to read in my inbox. So I'm recording this at the beginning/middle of a very, very busy launch week. So obviously I can't give full details of exactly how the launch has gone just yet because we haven't finished. We've got another 3 days yet before the launch actually goes and is complete. But obviously I'll be sharing those with you in a future episode. But what I wanted to share and collate for you guys was just how the podcast got on. And what we did to maximize traffic, what we did to maximize visibility, and go through all of that with you. So we've been correlating those stats over the weekend and obsessively tracking them for a week. Not that me and my team are in any way, shape or form sad, but we were very, very excited about some of the things that happened over the last few days. So I do sound tired. I am in launch mode, despite it being an automated launch. And this is pretty much the only thing that I'm doing this week, apart from answering questions about cash creation, which has been phenomenal to all of you who have already joined. I think at this point in time of recording, about 16 people who have already made the jump and decided to jump into cash creation to skyrocket their sales success in Q4. Well done. It's awesome. You are awesome. And I can't wait to see your results. And for everyone who's super interested in the podcast, let's get on with it. Let's talk about what actually happened last week, why I went podcast crazy, and what the results were. So the first thing I did was about, almost 12 months ago when I set up the podcast, when I first ever started recording, I remember going to Scott and saying, iTunes have like this new and noteworthy thing. And like, I'd kind of like to be on it because, vanity metrics, people will see my face and think that I'm great at podcasting. And he was like, bursting my bubble. He was like, you know what, new noteworthy, it means nothing, complete vanity metric, nobody really cares about it, it's completely random how it's done, and it's probably best not to focus on that. And so after, sobbing into my sangria for a little while, I kind of got over it and I was a bit like, right, fine, fair enough, if that's how it is, that's how it is, and didn't really think too much of it. And then about 6 months ago, I went to Scott and I said, look, so new noteworthy, clearly I can't hit that anymore because I've been in the charts longer than 8 weeks now. So you don't count for it anymore, allegedly. So what can I do? What can I do instead? Because what I'm finding is that I've got this amazing gaggle of people who listen to my podcast, who email me, who buy stuff from me, who join my community. And it's really, really awesome. But they're kind of like my favorite people, and I'd quite like more of them. And I don't really know what else to do other than, sticking my podcast on an advert, what I could do to get people to listen. And so at this point, Scott was like, right, okay, let's have a look at some numbers here. Let's see how your episodes are performing. And he was like, right, okay, with the numbers that with your podcast has, you're actually performing in the top 50% of users on the hosting platform that we use, which is called Libsyn. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. Because, I always want to be in the top something. If it had been like you're in the top 99%, maybe I'd have been a bit less bothered by this. But he's like, you're in the top 50. And I was like, that's pretty cool. And he's like, so at this point, with the amount of listens you're getting per episode, what we could do is we could aim to get more traffic organically using iTunes. And I was like, well, this sounds fantastic, right? Organic means free, woohoo! Because, sometimes you've got to be a cheapskate. And also, I was like, we're going to be harnessing the iTunes audience. And that's something that, it's a massive, massive audience base. seems like a really, really smart thing to do. There must be some people on there who like sales, like eccentric people, and would like to listen to the podcast. And he's like, yeah, that's something you should probably do. And so I was like, right, okay, cool. And so I percolated on it for a bit, drank some coffee, had to think about what I actually wanted to do and achieve, and came back to him in May and said, okay, so this top 100 thing, I'm going to do that. And this is what I'm going to do. And I'm going to share the plan with you guys today. But I remember showing the plan to Scott, and he's like, oh my God, that's a really good idea, but it's going to be a lot of work. And I was like, yeah, but it's worth it. So at this point, if you are somebody who has a brand new podcast, I would not spend this amount of time, money, and energy on getting your podcast into the top 100, right? That's going to be my caveat for you. I wouldn't bother just yet unless you know that your podcast is already producing clients. Honestly, I wouldn't do it just for vanity metrics to get into the top 100 on iTunes, as cool as it was, right? Okay, so there we go. I'm letting you into the sneak peek, right? As cool as it is to get into that top 100 spot, I will explain the reasoning why you don't just want the vanity metrics later, okay? So the first bit that I looked at when I was like, right, I'm going to hit this top 100 spot, I had to hit the goal. I had to set a goal. And for me, it wasn't enough to be in the top 200, even though the top 200 is what is featured on iTunes. If you go to the iTunes front page, you can look at podcasts, you can select your category. So obviously the category for this podcast is business and marketing. It's one of the most competitive because there are a ton of other people out there who know tons and tons about business stuff, and they're all putting out podcasts and getting in earbuds every single day. So it's a super, super competitive category. Let's face it. I mean, if I'd have been in pet grooming or landscape gardening or, train watching, maybe my podcast would have been in a less competitive category. It would have been a bit easier. But I'm not. I'm in business and marketing, and I'm going up against some of the big guys. So when I set the goal, for me, it wasn't about being in that top 200. It was about being in the first scroll. Okay. So the first scroll of the iTunes window. And for me, that meant being in the top 100. Okay. So from anywhere between 1 to 100. Just want to clarify that, because when I was saying it to people over the weekend, they were like, yeah, that's cool. And then they're like, but there's like 200 on there. So you're in the top 200. I'm like, no. So between 1 and 100, that's where I was going to be happy. Then I looked at the tools that I actually had in my own arsenal. So I think, sometimes what happens when we're going out and when we launch anything, whether it's a paid product, if it's a free thing, if it's a YouTube channel, a podcast, we're like, right, okay, great. What new thing can we do? What shiny, spangly tool can we use? What can we rope in? Who can we pay that's brand new and exciting that's going to get this done? I tend not to do that because those things aren't proven. I don't know how they're going to work. And I can't understand why we're not a fan of, if something works, don't go ahead and break it. Just keep doing the thing that works. So for me, I was like, okay, there are lots and lots of tools that I've used in my business over the years that have worked really, really well for me, that have, really highly engaged my audience, have really nurtured new people to my audience well, and ultimately have produced sales. So when I was looking at the tools that I had in my audience, the first thing I looked at was, I have a warm audience. I have a great following, great Facebook community, a good sized email list, and I have, of course, you poddies as well. So that was fantastic. I knew that I had people in my audience who were warm to the idea of listening to the podcast, or who listened to other podcasts potentially, but may not be listening to mine. The other thing that I knew I had in my arsenal was, I have a really good reputation for running solid challenges. Okay, so my challenges are not fluffy, they're not vague, they're not the kind of thing where it's like, oh, day 1, say your name. Day 2, state what it is that you want to do in 50 squillion years' time. Right? The challenges are solid, they're actionable, they're practical. And if you obviously participated a couple of weeks ago in the Sales Info Summer Challenge, you'll know that they are designed to make you think. They're genuinely there to give you value, to make you think about your situation, to make you, or give you tasks that are going to help you get to the next level. And I spent a good 40 hours of my week on Challenge Week in the free Facebook group, going through every single person's answers and giving them individual support, which is no mean feat. Okay, when you have like a couple of hundred people sign up for a challenge and you're doing that much work, it is tough. But I knew that I had this great reputation for challenges. And so for me, when I was looking at all the other things I could do to, put this kind of super boost effort towards getting my podcast into the top 100 on iTunes, those were the two things I knew were going to stand me in really good stead. One, because obviously I had this audience who was totally warm to the idea of podcasts, whether they were listening to mine already or not. And I had a great reputation for running challenges. So that's when I decided to come up with a plan. Right, okay, I know that I am going to run a challenge because that's my jam. But this time the twist is I'm not just going to run it through email or pre-recorded video. I'm going to run it through the podcast. Okay. And the reason that I did that was because running it through the podcast was really, really good for the iTunes goal. So I was really determined that we're going to hit this top 100, and getting the extra listens per day was going to be a really, really solid jump to be able to do that, because iTunes, like anything else, works on algorithms. And so it's done in listens, it's done in reviews, it's done in downloads, subscribers, whatever other mystical and magical things that Apple is keeping from us. And so I knew that running a challenge and having a consistent subscriber base each day, or a consistent listener base each day, would really help to push those numbers up. The other thing that I did was decided that I wasn't bothered about hitting the iTunes top 100 in the US. Okay. And this was one of those things I kind of had to put aside for a bit, and that Scott had actually advised me. So Scott's the podcast producer and general legend when it comes to producing, and Jesse obviously edits the show fantastically as well. But he kind of said, look, it's really difficult for people to be in two charts at the same time. So you kind of have to choose which one you want to go with. And so for me, I decided to focus on the UK top 100s in iTunes. And the reason I did that was because when I went back and I looked at my iTunes downloaders and subscribers information, what I could see was that the people or the countries who were listening to me most were UK, US, and surprisingly, a lot of you guys from Russia. So yay, that was really cool. When I was analyzing all the data, I was like, this is awesome. There are some really funky countries on here. So like Congo was on there. Dominican Republic was on there. I was like looking through and I was like, oh my goodness, this is like a Rolodex of places that I actually would quite like to go on holiday, apart from the UK because I live here. So, But for me, it was about making sure that, again, drilled down and that I really put this focus into the UK top 100. Now, doing that for me was pretty easy because most of my competitors in the business and marketing space who hold those top 100 spots release their episodes later in the day than I do. Now, that's because I get up at crack of dawn. I'm joking. Scott schedules them into Libsyn to come out early morning UK time because a lot of my audience is in the UK and obviously wants to listen to them on daily commutes to work, lunchtimes, mid-morning, that kind of thing. And so I was able to get early listens in, and I knew that I would be able to do that before some of my competitor audiences were up and actually about for the day and able to listen. So I figured that would push me up on the listening side of things. So I decided then I was going to go for that UK iTunes spot, and I was going to harness my existing audience. So I was going to obviously harness the existing audience I had in terms of people on my list and people in my Facebook community and people here on the podcast who listen to the podcast who wanted to sign up to the challenge. And they were going to be my warm audience, and the way that I was going to get those listener numbers up each day in order to leverage that iTunes traffic and get those ratings later on. Now, obviously, there were massive risks involved with this. I want to be really honest about this. I had numerous conversations with Liz, my lovely COO, saying, even up to a week before we did it, I was like, I don't know if it's going to work. Like, I'm a bit worried that it might not work. Now, this is, if you've ever gone out and launched anything before, again, free or paid, there are no guarantees in life, right? I've launched many things that I've sold nothing of that I thought would go really, really well. And equally, I've had amazing launches of things I'm like, that surprises me. So I'm always very, in terms of expectations, I release attachment to the outcome majorly when I'm trying something new, because my expectation is that it is new and that I will need to test and tweak to get it to that most efficient level. So for me, I was like, look, if we get to the top 100, like that's the creme de la creme for me. But if we get anywhere near it, like I'll be excited because this is something that shows progress. It shows that we're doing the right things and that, we know how to make this happen next time. So really up until a week before, for me, the risks were that, one, I was holding a challenge through the podcast. I'd never done that before, and I've not seen it done before. And so that was a big concern for me. You know, I know that some of the greats have kind of different kinds of podcasts than I do. A lot of them are mainly made up of interviews and things like that. And so I've only really seen challenges, and I've only really held challenges that have been run through pre-recorded video or live video or email. And so I was like, oh gosh, you know, I'm asking people to come out of their normal comfort zone in terms of the platform that they use, which is obviously normally Facebook or email. And I'm asking them to do something that is potentially inconvenient. You know, a lot of my audience came back and they were like, oh my God, I can't wait for the challenge, but I'm going to have to download a podcast app on my phone. And I didn't even think about that when I set up the challenge. I was just like, yeah, well, obviously everyone will do it through desktop. But of course, not everyone is a technological dinosaur like I am. So actually other people want to choose their mobile phones. How silly of me. So it was this kind of thing where I was a bit nervous about running the challenge through the podcast and how well that would actually go. You know, would people be able to just as easily go and access the episode each day? Would they be able to find it? Because obviously we couldn't produce, because we were wanting people to listen through iTunes specifically, we couldn't produce specific episode links. And that was obviously then quite a challenge, because we were expecting people to go and find day 1, day 2, day 3, and so on their own. You know, so we had to do different things. We had to make it really easy for people. We had to change up the titles so that people could see the days in them and they weren't getting confused by episodes. That was a big risk. You know, the other big risk for me was that we were actually spending a lot of money on this. You know, I obviously went to Scott and said, hey, look, you know, what's it going to cost me if I want to do an entire week of episodes, so an episode a day? And he was like, wow, okay, so we're going to produce it, we're going to edit it, we're going to do the intros, outros, show notes, get it onto Libsyn, make sure everything's done for you. And I was like, yep. So same as all the other episodes, but doing one every day. And so we'd then invested money, paying obviously Scott and Jessie to do the fabulous work that they do. So that's not a problem. But again, it's a front cost that probably I wouldn't have had I run the challenge through pre-recorded video or email. So it needed to have a return on investment, right? We've always got to look at this when it comes to business. Everything has to have this ROI. The second thing was the time and energy that went into forward planning the challenge and recording the episode. So actually sitting down. Now, I sat down in one day and pretty much batch recorded the whole lot. So when I was going through the episodes, you'll have noticed there are a lot of times that I'll say, look, you know, obviously I'm probably on holiday now, or I'm probably going and doing this now, because I wanted to be really upfront about the fact that the content was automated and that it was being delivered in an automated way. You know, and again, that was a risk, because sometimes people can feel like if the content is automated, that maybe it's not as good, maybe you don't care as much. And so for me, I knew that I was going to want to go and spend an awful lot of time in the Facebook group live in terms of supporting people, answering posts, answering questions individually, because I wanted people to know that even though the content was automated, my support wasn't. The challenge was live, and create that buzz around it. So that was also a bit of concern. You know, we'd spent lots of time and energy on recording them. We'd spent lots of money on getting them produced, getting them out there. And it's a bit of a risk, you know, asking your audience to do something different than they would normally do. And then, of course, the final risk for me was that I would be launching a program through the podcast. And that was terrifying, because usually if you're on a live video, you can see exactly who's there till the end of the live video. You can, if you're launching through email, you can check who's clicked the links. You can, if you're launching through pre-recorded video, if you host it through great hosting companies, you can look at who's watched until where, so you know who's seen the pitch. For me, I was pre-recording a pitch, you know, a few weeks in advance and thinking, crap, like this is effectively just going out into the ether. And I'm doing it the way that I would normally do on a video. So I'm doing it like right at the end. But what if people don't listen that far? Like the whole week of the podcast, we've been saying to people, hey, here's the question right at the beginning, so that if you don't want to go and listen to the whole thing, you don't have to. And then here's me pitching right at the end. I'm like, God, are they even going to be there? You know, so there were big concerns. There were big risks involved around potentially people didn't even know that the pitch had been made. You know, what would happen in that instance? What would we see in terms of sales? How would that work? So there were these big risks at play. However, in my infinite wisdom, I decided that the risks outweighed I decided that the return on investment outweighed the risk. And so we went ahead with the plan. And the results were as follows. So on day one, we officially hit 123, number 123 on the iTunes top 200 list in business and marketing. And that was really, really exciting. So that was the day that I was actually above Chris Ducker. I was like, woo, posted a little photo on my Facebook page about that. That was exciting. And on day two, we ended up at number 109. So I was like, oh my God, we're getting there. And day three, we finally cracked it. So Wednesday, we finally cracked it and we were going up and up and up and up and up the charts. And it was the day that we had started to ask for reviews. And the podcast peaked. So that's when it had its best day in terms of hitting those charts. And we actually landed at number 95. Woo! 95! I'm so excited. We took photos. So all of us, all of the people in my team were screenshotting like every hour. Oh my God, here's the podcast on iTunes. This is what number it is. And we were like rooting for it to get to the top. It was all really exciting. And we hit number 95 and it was phenomenal. So massive, massive thank you to everyone who did listen, who did review, who did subscribe, who did download. Because honestly, without you, obviously that wouldn't have been possible. And it was a really, really big deal. I was very excited. I'm actually still celebrating it with my glass of Prosecco here as I record this. And we were above Chris Ducker. We were above Amy Porterfield. We were above Pat Flynn. Some really, really, really big names in the podcasting world, in the business and marketing space. And it was just phenomenal. To hit that goal on day three was absolutely awesome, given that so much work and energy and effort and time had gone into it. Now, the other results that came of this that weren't necessarily related to the primary goal of being top 100 on iTunes were that we actually ended up with tons of extra challenge participants. So some of you who are listening, hopefully today, will have come from that launch, and you will be people who newly discovered us on iTunes. So yay! Welcome, because you are our newest poddies. And some of you have stayed with us after the challenge and continued listening to episodes, which has been awesome. I hope you're enjoying them. But it did mean, having that kind of boost, getting up to number 95 on iTunes. And even before then, even when we were hitting that 109 spot, the 99 spot, the 123 spot, the 147 spot, the 135 spot, you can tell we took a lot of these screenshots. We were seeing this organic extra traffic coming through iTunes. And that meant that more people were signing up to the challenge. It meant that more people were joining the free Facebook group. It meant more people were coming onto my email list. And actually, we're in day three of launch as of recording this. And it means that we've actually got people who have bought Cash Creation who came directly from that launch. So for you guys, you're awesome. I mean, you've only known me a couple of weeks, but you're already cash creators and you're already about to have the most successful quarter four of the year that you've ever had in business. I firmly believe that. The program is phenomenal and I can't wait to get to know you guys. But isn't that amazing? So for me, even though the primary goal was ostensibly a vanity metric, because it was, I did genuinely just really want to be that top 100 spot because I wanted to leverage the iTunes organic traffic. Hitting it meant so much more. It meant we got those extra participants in the challenge. It meant more people joined the email list. We've ended up with more cash creators. And that's just phenomenal. Now, the interesting thing was after Wednesday, when we had this massive peak on Wednesday, our listener numbers for each episode had effectively quadrupled from what they normally are, which was really, really awesome. So every day we were looking at it, we're like, oh my goodness, this many people listen today, and getting really excited because, it's awesome. When people listen to the podcast, I love it. I get a real kick out of the fact that you guys trust me enough to be in your earbuds, and that's really, really cool. So we were checking in all day on Libsyn, driving them crazy, I'd imagine, keeping on logging into the account. In fact, we did it so many times that we actually got logged out of the account. And they were like, no, you can't use it for another 2 hours because we were forgetting passwords and all this kind of thing. But, Thursday and Friday, we'd had this huge boost, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday on listener numbers. We were keeping them quite steady. And what we noticed was that those were the two hottest days of the year. So actually, the Friday was the hottest day of the year here in the UK. And that was the day that we got the lowest listener numbers. And lots of people kind of messaged me and they were like, yeah, I'm just out because I need to be in the sunshine. I need to be drinking beer. I need to be chilling, and I'm going to listen to the podcast later in the evening. So in the morning, our numbers were a lot lower than they had been all week. But in the evening, they kind of shot right up, and we were able to keep in that top 100 space, which was phenomenal. So that is how the podcast results went, and I always want to be as transparent as I possibly can about that, because I think sometimes we see gurus hitting key points. We see people hitting key points in business. They become Amazon #1 bestsellers. They get their podcast into the top 100 on iTunes. They hit all these kind of metrics. They're in Forbes or whatever. And we don't really know how it happens. And I've been fortunate enough to do all of those things. And I'm really, really grateful for the opportunities that I've had. But I figured that sharing the process with you, so that if you are somebody who's been podcasting for a while and you are getting clients from it, and this is the key thing, if you are already monetizing your podcast only, then yes, absolutely go for it. Go for that boost. Get some more metrics behind you. Get some new followers. Absolutely leverage the iTunes audience network. If you are not currently monetizing your podcast, i.e. your clients are not coming from your podcast, then hold off. And the reason that I say that is because actually, one of the best things that I've done for the podcast is to have amazing professionals produce it and edit it so the sound quality is good the majority of the time when, buses aren't going past my window, or motorbikes or kids or whatever, because that's really hard for Scott and Jessie to get rid of. But it's been invaluable for me having people who know what they're doing, who see and listen to lots of podcasts in the space to give me that helpful advice around, don't just go for new Noteworthy, go for something that actually means something. So if you're not currently monetizing your podcast, hold off just a little bit longer. And then when you're getting those clients consistently from it, that's when you really want to ramp it up, because that's when yes, the podcast is now doing the job I want it to do. It's bringing me leads, it's bringing me clients, and it's ready to be monetized even more. All right. So I'm going to do a full episode on monetizing your podcast and ideas on how to monetize your podcast in a couple of episodes time. For now, I'm about to get back to my Prosecco and holiday shopping, but I hope you have an excellent week and happy Monday. And thank you so much. If you are somebody who participated in the challenge, thank you so much for showing up for you. And thank you so much for taking the time to listen to the episodes each day and helping me hit my goal. And hopefully in the future, I will be able to return that favor and help you hit yours. I'll see you on Friday's episode, where I've got a super special guest who I know that you will absolutely love. They are incredibly interesting, and I had a blast recording that particular episode. I'll see you then.